Good morning, dear digital ship friends. We are excited to open the doors for you to connect to our webinar. Today, we are discussing how maritime commercial operations are evolving with our two guest speakers. You see already them here. Please meet Alexander Varvarenko, the founder and shareholder of Shipnext, and Nat Hutley, who recently joined as the Shipnext CEO. And we will start with Carl Jeffrey, founding editor of Digital Ship, giving us some insight into today's topic.
Okay, so the topic today is how maritime commercial communications are evolving, and one subject we're going to get into is the emerging role of natural language processing. So still in 2021, most people in the commercial world of shipping are doing their business communications with email rather than doing data platforms. So I thought one analogy is if you were doing your bank account by emails. So that means every time you buy something, you're sending an email to the supermarket saying, how much did I spend? And you've got to add it up yourself rather than seeing all your transactions and your current situation on one screen. That would be crazy, but that's what we're doing in shipping. So in shipping, all this email takes a lot of time, mental energy. We've got to search lots of emails and other messages. It can mean a lot of complexity if we're doing different communications at once. There's a lot of room for mistakes, but the biggest inefficiency might mean that a lot of stuff just doesn't get done if we don't reply to all the requests we get, or we're not optimizing as much as we could do, or we're limiting our communications just to people we know personally because doing the due diligence of new business partners by email takes a long time, or we're using more chains of brokers than we need to. Now, the shipping industry's tried to move everything onto one platform before. If you're my age or older, you'll be remembering the dot-com era of 2000, and it doesn't seem to have ended up with all that much. But there's new technologies around now, and one in particular, which I think is very interesting, is automated language processing. So if you use online language translation, you'll see how much better that's got. So in the world of shipping, what that means is we don't have to get this challenge of getting the buyers and sellers on the same platform. We can have our own systems which format the emails coming in into a digital format so we can get the data out of them. So rather than read the email, we just see the data. We can see what cargoes our customers want or what ships are available. And it means that if our counterparties still want to use email, they can do, or whatever system they'd like to use. So we're going to see a system from Shipnext today, which does this. It can be used by charterers, brokers, or ship owners to improve the commercial communications. And it's got lots of interesting technologies in it, one of which is natural language processing. We've got two speakers. Alex Varvarenko is the founder of Shipnext. He's based in Antwerp. He's also a commercial representative for Varamar, a heavy and project cargo shipping company, and a former chartering manager for CEC Lines. And he's going to be joined by Nat Hutley, who's managing director of Shipnext. He's based in London and a former shipbroker with Clarkson's SSY and London commodity brokers. Shipnext describe themselves as a blockchain-driven digital shipping marketplace and a reverse trading platform. So I'd like to invite Alex to start the talk. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to see you all join today. I will start by sharing the screen, I guess, and I will do the opening speech with Nat to follow. We position ourselves as a platform that uses AI to help process shipping data, search freight, digitalize freight negotiations, and automate workflows. And speaking of this, I would like to show you the way the digital maritime world, or say the shipping market, has evolved over time. But before I do, it's worth mentioning the market. The market size is today reached over $1 trillion, has been, according to United Nations, UNCTAD, has been less before, but we all know how important today's supply chains are and how big of a jump did we all experience in shipping. There's over 2 million freight brokers, brokers in general, shipping managers involved in the sector. Over 78,000 ships out there. So it takes time to at least overview all this amount of traffic. And there are over 300,000 different producers, traders, shippers involved in the daily movement of goods. And speaking of the market, we are going to focus only on shipping, on the shipping sector, not the transportation industry overall, but just the shipping sector, which is still the most important part of the movement of goods, the supply chain, covering 83% of world trade. So this is a quite a significant number we have to keep in mind. And the losses that we all experience today are mostly resulting from the inefficiency of the industry, the fact that it was known to be the most conservative and old and antiquated, and particularly the way we handle data. So we all know that shipping market today is basically a flow of emails, messages, data worldwide that results in almost thousands of emails received into companies' inboxes each day. We know of companies that receive 8 or 10 or even more thousand emails per day. And that means that managers, they're just drowning in data. 60 or more percent of freight requests and incoming orders, cargoes are not being handled, regardless of the experience or age. Managers are able to cover about 5 to 7 productive negotiations or offers each day. 75 to 80 or sometimes above percent of their time is spent on processing and data and emails. And those I would like to point out that those are the most highly paid and skilled employees. So their work is by far not spent productive enough. They're almost daily stuck to their screens every time they have to go for a meeting or a conference to attend. They have to then come back to their email boxes, which are then flooded with unread emails. We all know that. And as a result of all this and different other factors like inefficient commercial negotiations, trading, fraud as well, we all lose up to 5% on freight. We can elaborate on that, but this is a figure we have calculated based on all the other all these relevant factors. Over time, and this is also a very nice slide, over time, commercial relationship in shipping has evolved. So emails is not the first and not the last stage. It has, as you remember, started in the 19th century when there were brokers on the ground floor of the Baltic Exchange, shouting and trying to find a ship and a solution to ship their cargo. Then over to telegraph, telex, later CompuServe, and only in the mid-90s did we all see emails. But ever since, we all know there has been a lot of messengers like Skype, WhatsApp, Telegram, and also platforms. And they are playing a very important role today in the way we process data. It's very important. None of the platforms until recently have been successful in onboarding users because of this big gap between everybody on email and suddenly the need to use a platform, and therefore the platforms again came back to a wide audience only in the 2016 with a wide introduction of NLP, natural language processing, a technology that allows the processing of emails, which is totally different from what it was before. There were platforms that did process emails, but they were using other technology which only allow you to use keyword search or things like that. But now with the use of natural language processing, machine learning, the algorithm understands the logic behind an email. Similar to what you see when you use Gmail or a messenger that suggests how the sentence should be ended. Similar technology allows you to process emails, process the logic behind the text, and over onto this seamless integration into a platform that can be used today. But nevertheless, today you walk into these shipping companies and brokering companies and you see 2 or 3 screens. several messengers companies use, emails, services, platforms, multiple platforms, in fact, each for each kind of data. And well, we all know that the industry as such is all about brokers. We in our company, our philosophy is that brokers are the professional traders of the industry. They can have mixed roles depending on where they work. They can be working for a shipping company. In that case, they are called a chartering manager, but they could also be working for a trading firm. And in that case, they would be a shipping manager or a traffic manager, whatever you call it. But nevertheless, they are all brokers. They're all professional dealers of the daily day-to-day chartering or shipping and freight management. And over time, there has been actually not much change. You see that the market has become more electronic. Today, we all call the market as basically nothing else than a flow of millions of messages, emails, transaction, emails with shipping data, emails with open fleet, emails with freight indexes and freight negotiations. But nevertheless, the structure as it is has not changed. The communication channels have evolved. We all know that in the past, it was important to have as many brokers as possible in the panel. Each broker, similarly to how the legal industry works, where you have an internal chief legal officer or lawyer, but he would nevertheless employ other lawyers, external lawyers, whenever he would need a particular professional approach or a more in-depth knowledge of a certain field. But over time, it has come to larger brokers taking over because they are simply a bit more, well, say diverse, not only in the type of cargo they cover, but also in the different size of tonnage they cover. And we see nowadays with more shippers with a panel of 1 or 2 or 3 exclusive brokers approaching then all the carriers or operators or forwarders, for example, in the sector. And this has been well, as a next evolution phase. But today we see brokers that are using a platform or are using their own platform, and this allows them to be even more connected to either their customer, cover the data faster and better, similarly to how you would see stockbrokers in USA some couple of dozens of years ago, trying to be faster and more efficient in the way they would get access to stock data. Today, the same is happening in shipping. You see brokers being connected to a platform or having their own platform, and then onboarding their carriers or other brokers or their customer in the day-to-day in data management. And comparing the different approaches here, I would probably like to stop at this slide to reflect on some of the directions this trend has taken. We've seen probably a number of them evolve in the recent past. We see broker-centric platforms. The approach here, and this is that slide on this part on top, we see companies like Quest, Cleverness, who are either carriers or brokers, but their platform, the platform they develop is aimed at their customer and their communication with their customer. In other words, going to their customer saying, look, we've been your broker for many, many years. Why going into the market by email, collecting all those rates? Let us provide you with a cabinet on our platform, help you collect all the freights, show you the other data you need, help you manage your incoming information, your freight tendering, your negotiations, your contracting, perhaps cargo tracking, and all the way down to supply chain management. We see other types of platforms that are created by large brokering firms, such as BRS or Clarksons. For example, Sea Life is a good example to use here. A sophisticated platform built by a large, the largest, I think, brokering firm, and they still build interaction with other brokers, but there is a certain functionality that is available only to them and their end customers. So the mining firm or a trading firm that they try to approach and onboard onto a platform like that. And down to a platform which Shipnext introduces that is basically broker-centric. We onboard all small, medium, and large brokers. Nat will tell you more later on how we have evolved, and yet we see brokers as important players, regardless of where they work. And yet, of course, this trend is an important trend, which actually Shipnext patented the process of combining emails, shipping data in emails and messages, real-time data that is, and the platform it is, and providing that kind of a seamless interaction between brokers and the platform. The questions you have to ask yourselves when you digitalize, and this is a very important slide for all of you who plan to move ahead with the digitalization strategy, is how has my competitor involved in their work and strategy, just to make sure that you don't fall out of the competition. You have to make sure that you're always in line with the speed and the efficiency at which data is managed. And speaking of efficiency, we also want you to remember the second question is how do I monitor it? How efficient is my work remotely? You know, today that some teams have moved to overseas work, remote work, working from house. How do you monitor those teams? How do you keep track of what they do and how they do it? Third question is, how sustainable is your shipping department or shipping division or shipping department, transport department in general? We've seen companies where the whole transportation is handled by one person who would come in and say, look, I've been handling this business in this company for 20, 30 years. I know everything. It's all in my head. Now, well, you have to ask yourself, how sustainable is your company then? I mean, what if that person is not there? What if he changes work? What if something happens to him? How efficient is your company going to stay with that person being out of his daily business? And that is one more reason probably to digitalize, to make sure that that data is stored. I mean, think of a platform, think of a digital system as your next trainee, as the person you have to teach, to combine, to process data, to manage your in-house data efficiently, a system that would not forget, and not to replace, but rather to help any other manager who can be ill or traveling or overloaded with data, just to help him with that real-time processing. Next question is, how secure is my data on a platform? This is a question we've been asked many, many times. I think the right question here to ask is, how much more money can I spend than is being spent by Google, Microsoft, or Amazon? I mean, this is basically it. Cloud services are there. It's totally inefficient to spend or try to be more efficient, more secure, more sustainable at home using your server and not using a cloud services, because those companies that do provide that service, they spend by far more than any others independent company today. And especially when talking about small and medium-sized business. How much money and time can I spend? This is a very important question to ask yourself. Never underestimate the amount of time and money you can spend before you start any digitalization. And yet you have to always ask yourself, how much money am I spending already? Spending on salaries, I mean, think of 60, 80% of managers' time spent on emails. Calculate the salary per year, take 60, 70% of that, and that's what your cost today, something that you continuously pay for your managers managing data manually. Should I build my own solution? Well, I think the right question here would be, again, asking yourself, what are your resources? We believe that building your own solution is only efficient when you are a large company that can afford to do it, because there has been, the way businesses are built today is by either crowdfunding or venture capital funding. I mean, you cannot beat that. Companies get funding by far bigger and gain greater support, international coverage and support, when they are funded by fundraising processes and venture capital firms. And finally, whose problem I'm solving? This is probably one of the most important and yet sometimes forgotten questions you have to ask yourself when building the problem. Are you solving just your own problem as a manager, for example, or as a company, or are you solving everybody else's problem too? And if you are investing into digital software for everyone to use, make sure they have that similar problem that you're trying to solve. Now over to Nat, please take over, and I give the floor to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alexander, and thank you also to the team at Digital Ship for this opportunity. It's great to be here. I hope you can now see my screen. I think I'm on the wrong screen here. Can you see my screen?
No, you've jumped to another slide.
Okay. 1 second.
Good.
1 second.
Do you want me to share a screen?
No. Is that, it's up now, I believe.
Yeah.
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 So, yeah, I think really just starting off as as the platforms in general. There's no doubt in our mind that the future of communication in the shipping industry will be on platforms. However, what is going to happen, what happens in every other industry, as we've seen in insurance and other industries before, there'll be a huge growth in platforms. Perhaps the problem that people will be experiencing in the coming weeks and months will not be receiving so many emails, but it will be rather how many passwords they'll need to remember to different platforms. And at the moment, we're seeing several key areas in this in our area. We've got email processing. There are a number of different players in that sector. Freight tendering, which we're seeing quite a lot. Marketplaces and platforms, which Alexander has mentioned. Some have decided to develop them themselves. Others are working with the incumbents, which are currently operating. And lastly, digital forwarders, which are aiming, and we're even seeing Amazon coming into freight trucking at the moment. The future is definitely digital, and that really introduces Shipnext as where we see our position in the market. So as we've spoken about earlier on, that natural language processing means that we're able to organize communications and arrange things on a trading desk. We're able to pull multiple sources of information. And what we believe is that we need to create an ecosystem that works with different platforms, which is pulling information from multiple sources, from your internal communications, but then also from external players who are also offering services around bunker pricing or port pricing, etc. So we offer a number of different features, and our value proposition for different stakeholders in the industry is different. We've already covered email processing, but this stretches through to instant matching. Once our algorithm has processed the emails, it's then even able to start matching cargoes and vessels. We're developing an instant freight index, which is leveraging from the data, the big data analysis that we're now able to do as our algorithm is processing millions of emails. From a perspective of a ship owner or a charterer, this is a platform where you're able to offer freight tendering, freight negotiations, or contract management. And this is a great place to manage CRM and other processes. If you just give me a moment, my colleague's phone is ringing. with you. So freight management and cargo tracking is really the future of ship owners being able to make smart decisions about where they put vessels, whether moving from the Atlantic to the Pacific if this is a good time to do it or if this is a bad time to do it. This type of information, this way of operating your vessels is only possible using big data analysis. It's only possible to look beyond what the FFA price is doing and establish trends, previous years, current situation, etc. I mean, I know in the audience there's a number of people working on satellite communications with vessels. We were recently at a conference where improving the communication with vessels will assist in delivering better routing for making a greener maritime industry. Being able to communicate with the vessels will further make big data analysis and proper allocations of tonnage in particular markets even easier, which is a massive attraction for using Shipnext to ship owners. The trading desk, I think, is our key function, which we've covered earlier, which I sat next to when I was working at Clarkson's in Melbourne. I sat next to a man called Max Langham, who has basically a photographic memory, and it made it very difficult for me to compete with someone who was that good, because that's really what shipbroking was at the time. It was how quick are you, how good are you at remembering information and processing that information, being able to match cargoes and vessels quickly. This is beyond the relationship stuff. This is being an effective broker. The trading desk now, you know, it does all of that work for you. Instead of trawling through hundreds of emails, you can see here that the cargoes and orders are organized neatly onto a trading desk. When you click on one, it matches with the other. It's a CRM tool where you're able to communicate directly with the broker that's circulating it or the owner, which is just a fairly revolutionary tool, which is only possible now because of natural language processing, which is something that was not there during the dot-com boom when platforms started before. The cargo monitor, as you can, I'm sure, see from this, being able to track trends on, you know, cargoes coming out of a particular loading area. This can go much further as mining companies or exporters are able to pick more opportune times to look for tonnage, but on top of that, they're able to monitor internal KPIs, internal staff members, how many quotes have been received, how many quotes have been sent. This process does not only increase, it increases a company's effectiveness, but it also, having a broader market to be able to send cargoes to, increases the chance of getting a more competitive freight rate. This comes back to what Alexander was mentioning earlier about losses. With information being siloed in different brokers, it doesn't mean that it's the best way to speak to the whole market. So, you know, the cargo monitor is a way of reaching a larger market. Fleet monitor, it's the same thing. I've sort of touched on this before. I'm very keen to get on to the audience's personal questions for their use cases. So I'd love to see some questions started to come through. Port data, again, I know that there are some agents that are listening to this, and being able to not just find a vessel or find a cargo, but from the perspective of the charterer or from an owner, to be able to communicate directly with an agent, to be able to find assistance in a particular port. And this obviously is going to stretch as this ecosystem grows to bunkering, to resupplying, but to understand the handling facilities. Previously, this has been a very arduous process where you've had to make phone calls, send emails, receive emails. All of this information needs to be collected on one platform, which is what the port data module of the Shipnext platform does. Not just agents details, but lineup, cargo availability. So you're able to, again, choose more opportune moment to either ship or to call in a port. And the freight calculator, again, when I was working as a shipbroker, a huge amount of time was spent inputting vessel information and then inputting the specific cargo information. Now, because of modern process and technology, you're just simply able to click on a vessel on the trading desk and click on a cargo on the trading desk. The rotation has already run for you. The loading and discharge rates have already been pulled from your emails, and this information is this way of working is just much more efficient and much quicker. Freight matrices as well, which is a much sort of deeper dive into current, future pricing, which is something that we're currently launching at the moment. So Shipnext Connect, as Alexander was mentioning around data, and I think we're not. We know that the market at the moment is based around people using different email processes, be that Gmail or Outlook or Sedna. The Shipnext platform is designed to layer on top of that, as a way of having this internal communication processed and to leave your inbox free and just to focus on the things that are important. So document handling as well, EBLs has been a big topic of conversation recently, and it will grow. It seems each country, each port in some cases, is trying to develop their own version. I think this is a typical example of the pendulum swinging past zero again, and it will be interesting for us to monitor how this situation changes. But our development team has recently been awarded with we are developing a very cutting edge EBL, which will be based on the blockchain, but working these through ports to do cross-border, to do multi-jurisdictional transactions is obviously a challenge, and the answer is not there yet. So I'm just keen to sort of move straight on to questions now. I think that, as you can see, the Shipnext platform is very comprehensive. But, what we are aiming to build here is not a marketplace or a platform, but an ecosystem where different stakeholders of the shipping industry are able to communicate. So, yeah, that sort of brings me to a close there. And Carl, I'd love to hand over to you to help us with these Q&As.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Okay, so we're now going into the question and answer session. So if you'd like to put any questions you've got in the Q&A box, I've got about 5 here, but it's probably better if we get some from the audience. There's a general one to begin with. I mean, this question of language. So over the decades we're doing digital ship, this topic of data standards comes up the whole time. People saying data standards been so important and we just don't have them. They take too much organization. Whole world's got to agree on one data standard. So if we're saying now that language processing is actually because everybody can write in English if they work in shipping, everybody can send an email and computers can read email. We don't need data standards. So this is going to be the universal way of integrating. I mean, it's wonderful if this is true. I'm just wondering how good this stuff really is. It's obviously getting better, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, Carl, thank you. I will take the opportunity now to respond to this. In fact, you're right in terms of the awareness of the importance of the data standards, but I think shipping is the only, or transport industry as such is the only industry where there are 2 versions to English. There's a spoken English or standard English, but there is also short English. And when we started building our algorithm 5 years ago, you cannot imagine how many versions there are to each port, each area, each sea. used today. People write with 2 letters, 1 letter, 3 letters, shorts, and that creates that complexity. So when you're talking about using technology, we link, just because we promote interconnectivity, our aim is to link it to those standards or standard names which are created by those whose business model that was, creating standard names, creating standard port names that are used and are updated sometimes. Sometimes you have a port name which is being changed, and in the industry you still have multiple users using that old unexistent name, which creates a lot of problems sometimes.
Well, this is a recent development, being able to get over that. I mean, I guess computer code itself is very, very precise that a computer can follow, but you're using probabilities, you're using databases, just like Google Translate does. You can handle different versions of the same port name, I guess. That's what's new, I suppose, isn't it?
Well, something indeed, when we started off, and even today, there is literally not a single database which is continuously up to date with all the latest, updates on each vessel's name being changed, with vessels being scrapped. So you have any other solution, and not to name any in particular, but any platform today that you can use tracking vessels would have some outdated data in them. And that is a problem. But imagine there wasn't any platforms. Imagine we all relied only on email still today. How much of the updated real-time information would we receive?
Oh, okay. So another question. So I think, Nat, you mentioned that platforms are inevitable. So those of us who've been through the .com era, we sort of a bit of a deja vu. Everybody said obviously it's going to be a platform, then it turned out that that it wasn't. But I guess logically you're right, but also you can be quite cynical and say that the shipping industry has resisted digital platforms for a long time. Why is it going to change now? I don't know. I suppose there's an obvious answer that it's more efficient.
Yeah.
And
I think it's sort of beyond the fact that it's more efficient. I think that yes, shipping is quite an old-fashioned business, and it has demonstrated that it is slower to adapt than others. That doesn't mean that it won't adapt. I think that if we come back to the point that you were making, Alexander, about this sort of loss of information or incorrect information, we can't have that in the future. If a vessel's being positioned or being told that it is in a certain position, but our platform is pulling AIS data that proves that that vessel's in another, then that's inefficient way of working. That's potentially even fraudulent. Working in existing systems with simple emails doesn't prevent that, whereas working on a platform, working as we move towards introducing more and more technology, as vessels on the water get higher levels of connectivity, I think that the world needs this. The shipping industry definitely needs this. And I think what we'll see is brokers, owners, and charterers gaining a competitive edge over more old-fashioned positions. Not to say that old family-run shipping businesses won't continue to operate in the same way, but they will need to utilize modern technology at some point, or at least interact with it at a certain point to continue to find business for their vessels, I imagine.
Oh, very good. So another direction. So it's very welcome questions from the audience. We didn't have any so far, but I thought maybe if we get into vessel performance and CO2, that might. So that's something you sort of touched on somewhere, that you can use your vessels much more efficiently. So if you're managing a pool of tankers, this kind of data will help you. I mean, this is kind of interesting because this is such a high priority at many companies now, and it's sort of driving a lot of investment decisions. If you can show a CO2 angle, I think you touched on it once, I think, wasn't it, about the vessel performance and efficiency? I don't know if you have any more thoughts on.
There's no doubt that trying to change a vessel to be a hybrid vessel, for example, is not very straightforward. There's not a answer for the shipping industry to convert immediately to being a green industry. It is one of the largest polluters in the world. And yes, it's obviously a hot topic of conversation at the moment. Higher levels of communication with vessels to give more accurate information about weather data through satellite communication, and then having that satellite communication delivered quickly to owners to change routing to mean that a vessel routes further north or further south to avoid a storm. This is an easy, well, perhaps it's not easy. I don't understand exactly the technology behind a satellite communication with a vessel, but that's definitely a way that we know we can improve and reduce CO2 emissions. That's one of the small things that we can do. A more broader move towards a renewable fuel for vessels is a much bigger and more complicated issue, I believe. I don't think anyone has the answer to that yet.
Carl, may I just add a few points to what Nat just said? We have also had been approached by a number of companies with large number of fleet, and that said, you also have to bear in mind that with the fleet of 100 or 200 vessels, there's also a certain level to how much you start to depend on the big data, on the efficient planning. And that's where Shipnext can also help with the algorithms of efficient space utilization, minimizing the ballast runs, connecting vessels planning to or your operational or your operational software to the lineups data, or how the cargo is being delivered or the readiness of the cargo. All of that is sometimes relies more on real-time data than on the knowledge of a chartering or a shipping manager. So that level of processing of the real-time data is so much important, and sometimes just irreplaceable.
Yeah, I think Carl, as you were saying, which was the point that we were talking about earlier, with will everyone convert to a more digital future? I guess it will get to a stage where users of modern technology will know, okay, let's ballast at a slower speed, or let's go slower because there is congestion in the port. So they know that there's no point to rush, but they can see from the satellite data that there will be the queue is getting smaller. And this will be more efficient from a CO2 perspective. It will also be more better profitability and other things like that. Whereas people who are not adapting will, head straight to the port and then obviously be waiting outside.
And it's not like we are promoting Uberization of the industry, but that's also something inevitable. We've seen this in trucking as well. There are a number of trucking freight, so-called freight management platforms in land transportation. We've seen Uber. All of them, they all reduce the. Just to answer your question, they all reduce the amount of emissions you have and facilitate a more efficient asset management.
Yeah, well, stuff like triangulation of cargoes. I don't know how useful that ever is. These two opportunities come up every now and again, don't they? You can take other cargoes on the way back and things like that. Is it?
True. I mean, you've seen owners who are just afraid of going from one area of trade to another just because they have never dealt with it, or brokers who have been historically always concentrating on, let's say, internal, or intermed business or inter-Black Sea business. But at the end, they're brokers. The whole practicality or the whole process of being a broker is almost identical, regardless of the size of the ships you work with. So you should be quite flexible working with other sectors, other ship owners as a broker, because your customer needs it.
Yeah. Okay. Another direction, I think you're talking about these platforms connecting together. I think, Nat, you mentioned connecting into port platforms. And I suppose maybe we're seeing a future where the whole industry is in platforms. So the charterers have their platforms, and the brokers have their platforms, and the ports and the ship owners and the ship management companies, and all these platforms either talk to each other very well using digital communications or some mixture of email or some natural language. I guess this is where we're going. I suppose this is kind of no more email, but multiple platforms talking to each other. Is this? I guess it's kind of next 10 years is what we're going to see, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that you know, I've watched another webinar here on the digital ship about breaking down silos and improving workflows. And yes, that's certainly going to be a challenge. I think that, you know, all of us, you know, we're spending a lot of our work on developing APIs, on making sure that we're able to communicate with other platforms. And again, making sure that we're able to validate the information that we are collecting from multiple sources to make sure that it is true. You know, and I think that these platforms, yes, there seems to be a tendency where we believe at Shipnext that the future of the shipping market is moving towards more open communication. There seems to be a tendency at the moment for people to, you know, almost like don't copy my homework type thing. You know, they want to sort of close down the information. But yes, you know, there will be too many platforms, and then there will start to be better communication, and then the Pareto principle will come into fashion, and there'll be a sort of 80-20 fashion where, you know, number of platforms are working with a number of others, I believe.
Yeah. What about the charterer side? I mean, a lot of these oil traders are still incredibly secretive cultures, I think, aren't they? Even if they don't need to be. Or sort of is this what you're finding, that you kind of, they only want one person to know what cargoes they're looking for, and that's not going to change?
I mean, that's probably better Alexander answers.
You know, in fact, you've nailed it on the cover here, Carl. We've just had been approached by one of the largest tanker owners who wants to connect and wants to help us build other features on top and invest in Shipnext. We are always open to, let's say, to new partners exactly for that purpose. You know, exactly to not only to be better internally. I was surprised because, you know, my background is from shipping. I know the pain points of every carrier or a shipping company in terms of how, you know, to handle all these big flows and how to see, you know, whether your crew is underloaded or overloaded with work. But they also wanted to see how their competition performs and where their ships are. And of course, there is, you know, with marine traffic and other solutions, that possibility is there. What we offer as Shipnext is the matching. So next to every requirement or inquiry you receive from your customer, not only can you see how well your vessel is matched, but also you can compare it economically to how other competing vessels are matching to each and every inquiry, and that places your customer as at the central point to you as their service provider. You can then choose whether to go out, time charter a ship, or help them as a broker, or position your vessel. But at least that instant visibility helps you be more efficient in your daily trade.
Yeah, well, there's an important differentiation between transparency and openness, because I suppose ExxonMobil can be totally transparent to the shipping companies they want to deal with, but they're not telling the world what ships they want. It's a different thing, isn't it?
There is always, you know, for example, you can, like before, you had the ship owners who thought nobody sees their vessels, that, you know, they can gather like 5 to 10 Panamax vessels in a certain area or Cape vessels in a certain area and then start gambling. That today doesn't happen, right? You see where the ships are, you see where they're going in ballast and where they're going full. All the data is used by algorithms to help you understand. And this is what our freight matrix is all about, helping you understand with the help of real-time processing and predictive analytics where the imbalance of trade will be greater or not. That's exactly what should allow you to be more efficient in your, you know, decision-making process.
Okay. Another question we haven't got into, the whole the crew communications. When a lot of people have a negative impact, they think they don't want cargo owners hassling the crew saying you should be here already. And I guess a lot of this stuff can be automated. Is this where you think we're going with the communication with the ship itself? You don't need the crew to personally reply to messages. They can get stuff digitally, do you think? Is it?
Nat, can I start there?
Yeah.
You know, first of all, you know, there are a lot of factors that change about shipping. You know, like today in the freight indexing and so on, you have a big impact of bunker prices, Carl. And we all know that due to decarbonization, there's going to be a lesser impact on freight indexes, or let's say the impact of bunker price in the risk factors around freight. We also see lesser communication issues in the future with vessels. We see trends towards autonomous shipping. We see trends towards having operating, let's say the key operating roles in-house rather than on the ship. So we do not know where all this is going, but certainly the security issues and the process of innovation will remove some of these critical pain points.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we're coming to the end now. I mean, I think that there's two amazing stories here. One is about the standardization, how we're using natural language, and the other one is about the vessel performance. I think that's these companies trying so hard to get a few % of improvement out of the engine itself, but you can, by doing better efficiency in how the vessels are being used, from people having better information, I think that's a much easier way to get 2% performance improvements. A lot of companies under pressure from their banks to show how they're using the vessels better and getting loans that depend on that. So I think that's very, very interesting. And I think it's also a vision for the future about how everything's going to be on platforms, all talking to each other, but still maintaining secrecy where necessary, but also the communication is possible when necessary, I think. So I guess, I don't know if you want to take a couple of minutes for closing words, and we'll see if any last questions come in while we're doing it, I suppose. Do you want to do that?
I mean, I think so, certainly from my side, Shipnext as a platform is really designed to make people's lives easier as a way of sort of pooling multiple sources of information to allow managers to concentrate on the things that they should be concentrating on. I see sort of email and looking up port data and other things like that as being ultimately a bit of a waste of time for managers. It should all be in one place. I think the knock-on effect of that is obviously better access to data, better performance of vessels, but really we should say it's better performance of vessels profitability or charterers profitability. The knock-on effect of that is obviously towards a greener maritime industry, but it's a difficult thing to do. But yeah, I'll pass over to you, Alexander. I'm sure you've got what to close on.
Yeah, Carl, well, I totally agree. We all see companies who have already taken a leading role in this, companies with big budgets to spend. We all expect smaller and medium-sized companies to either follow on this trend or fall out, and then be basically lose their competing edge towards the larger players. This is that consolidation in the industry that has happened all over other industries as well. Well, I hope that the listeners of today's session and all the other industry players do follow along and find a way in this complicated and important process.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. Well, I think Alex and Nat are very keen to hear views and questions from anyone in the audience. I think there'll be a survey form popping up after we've finished. You can put any thoughts you have in there, and also I think we'll be sharing your email addresses. So maybe if you think about, I think this is a vision for the future in multiple different ways, and also very efficient way to improve businesses right now. So thank you very much, Alex and Nat, and I shall pass back to Vida. Cheers.
Yeah, I hope you've got a new perspective about the evolution of maritime commercial communications from Alexander Varvarenko and Nat Hutley of Shipnext. Our webinars are getting more frequent this month. We're back on Thursday, and even with 3 webinar stories, we're back next week. Feel free to check out more details at webinars.digitalship.com. And now Digital Ship is signing off until this Thursday. Take care. Bye.
Oh, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.